Get ready to be inspired by the great things happening in rural education. The Rural Scoop will bring you new ideas and innovative solutions. We'll dive into education issues and we'll highlight what's working in your rural communities. You'll hear from a variety of educators, administrators, professionals, and others who will provide relevant and engaging content in each episode. And now, serving up the scoop, here's your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf.
Welcome back to the Rural Scoop. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Sadorf, and today's episode takes us to Southern Iowa to talk about what it really means to lead in rural America, the realities, the resilience, and the relationships that define our small town schools. Our guest today, Jayme Braida, is the principal of Columbus Elementary in the Chariton, and I'm going to ask you to correct me if I said that wrong, Community School District. She was recently recognized as Iowa's Elementary Principal of the Year and is an NAESP National Distinguished Principal, which is quite a big deal. Congratulations on that. But really what stands out most about Jayme isn't necessarily the recognition, but it's her purpose. Jayme grew up in a small rural town faced with many of the same challenges that her students are experiencing today. And she's dedicated her career to raising expectations, creating trauma-informed systems, and building cultures where every student and staff member feels seen and heard and valued. So Jayme, welcome to the Rural Scoop. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing introduction.
Did I say the name of the school correctly?
It's actually Sheraton.
Okay.
But you're close. You're very close.
Okay. Jayme, I want to start by asking you about your origin story. So you've often said that this work is really a personal thing. Can you talk to us about a defining moment or a mentor from your early years that helped shape the kind of leader that you've become?
Yes, definitely. So it is deeply personal to me. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process of writing my memoir, and that memoir is called Seen, Heard, Valued, One Child's Journey from Overlooked to Outstanding. Mm. So through that memoir, I talk about the early years growing up in a small rural school district. It was actually, my school was in the middle of a cornfield.
Oh, wow.
Very small. And with that came a lot of great things. You know, the sense of community. I was involved in everything. I was in all the sports. I got to be in all sorts of clubs. My mom was the 4-H leader. And so there is this sense of community and sense of belonging that I am so grateful that I grew up with that. And I'm so grateful that my kids now get to experience that because we live in a fairly rural area, just 20 miles from where I grew up. And so that, of course, shaped what I'm doing now and where I am and why I am where I am. However, what was kind of hidden, which most people don't know about me, was that my childhood was shaped with trauma as well. So when you think about generational trauma, generational poverty, I experienced that firsthand. And I had many adults in my life who really made me very resilient. So I was able to overcome some of those challenges and actually get to where I am today. Who would have thought? People say, I cannot believe you became a school principal, because I had lots of behavior challenges growing up. Despite the fact that I looked the part and I was involved in all the activities, that's the thing about rural communities. You can kind of do it all, and people don't see some of the generational trauma that you're carrying, because you kind of can become desensitized to that. So I was able to become this principal and then National Distinguished Principal. It's just such an honor. And knowing that I've talked to a lot of people and we cannot remember, 20, 30 years ago, when a person from South Central Iowa has represented or held the title of Iowa Elementary Principal. So I'm just really honored because for me, I'm not just representing my school, I'm representing all Southern Iowa schools. Yeah. And just showing that excellence is possible for our schools when we have intentional leadership and we can, think about and imagine the possibilities, what can be and what can exist in our systems and our schools. On the other hand, my siblings also experienced the same, growing up in the same area. And I grew up with my sister who, same as me, experienced some of the same trauma and things like that. However, she didn't have the support system. And because of some ineligibility policies with athletics, she was ineligible for sports. Through that, she lost a lot of her friendships and a lot of her adult connections. And slowly her life began to spiral. And so she fell through kind of that safety net and ended up with a very different outcome from me. Out of my 4 siblings, almost all of them experienced drug abuse as adults. My sister had a meth addiction by the time she was 20 and was in and out of lots of different rehab facilities. And, by the grace of God, she is doing amazing now. It's great. 10 years later, and has really turned her life around. But for my other half siblings, we don't have similar stories. And my oldest half sibling died of a drug overdose. And so, there is really power in small communities. There's power in adults if we're intentional about connections and catching kids so no kid falls between the cracks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really a powerful story, Jayme. And when you look back, at your own experience with schooling, obviously there were educators that helped you see a different path forward. Can you talk about someone in your schooling experience who believed in you before you even might have believed in yourself, that helped you overcome that trauma and get to a place where you are today, where you're able to not only thrive, but also help people that might be in those same circumstances?
Absolutely. So there were teachers and adults in my life from very early on that I can remember shaping who I am today. Some of them shaped me in a very negative way, and some of them shaped me in a very positive way. And one in particular was my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. DeBooth. And actually, it's kind of a beautiful thing because, first of all, when I was in school, I was experiencing a lot of this sense of, I didn't have belonging and fit it. And then, going home and, there's a lot going on in my household that people didn't know about. And so I needed to be at school. School's my escape. But unfortunately I had ADHD and I was just off the walls and my behavior was out of control. And I was used to just getting stuck in the hallway all the time and go to the hallway. And I just had this feeling that I don't belong anywhere. And I tell you, I feel like I spent more time in the hallway than I did in my own classroom.
Right.
And I got to Miss DeBooth's class and it was a different experience for me. And I don't think that there's anything she did super amazingly different other than she gave me a fresh start every day. She made me feel like I belonged. She poured into me. She spoke words of kindness and hope to me. Sorry, I get a little emotional. And she told me, you're going to be a writer someday. And just all these things that I had never had anyone speak that kind of truth over me and just made me feel that way. They say, it's not about what people do, it's how they make you feel. And she made me feel like $1,000,000. And so I moved on to the middle school and then the high school, and she left teaching actually. And I lost touch with her. But all along my journey, I kept thinking, I wish Miss DeBooth could see me. I wish she knew how well I was doing. And then I became a 5th grade teacher, just like Miss DeBooth. And then I became a principal. And my entire journey, I have really tried to make sure every teacher makes every student feel the way that Miss DeBooth made me feel. And actually, at the end of my memoir, I was able to make contact with Mrs. DeBooth. Finally, I found her. It was 15 years later. And I shared an email exchange with her just about the power that she had in my life and how she planted these seeds that now are spreading far and wide as far as her impact goes. And she just had no idea. I don't even know if I think she remembered me a little bit, but she just had no idea that what I was going through and how much her kindness and intentionality and relationship building with me, how much that impacted my future And so the epilogue of my memoir is our email exchange together. So it's a nice way to wrap up the story, but that is definitely the most influential, I would say, adult in my life that shaped my story.
That's wonderful that you actually had the opportunity to say thank you. It's not always an opportunity that we get. So that's fantastic. So how is your understanding of leadership changed since you've become a principal? I mean, that's always interesting to go from a teacher's position into leadership at the site level. And what surprised you the most, especially about leading in a rural setting?
Yeah, so when I was a teacher, I knew probably year one, I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be in leadership positions because I just felt like my impact, I needed to make more of an impact and I wanted to make more of a difference. And so I've always been one that I want to challenge the status quo. I want to fight for kids. I love helping people become better and coaching people. And so, I don't know if anything really surprised me. Maybe what did surprise me was the love that I have for rural school districts. I became a principal in a rural school. I taught in rural schools. And then I left for a year to become a leadership consultant for Des Moines Public Schools. So huge shift going to our urban district. And I loved it. I loved that year I spent. I learned about the big system and how that might work. And there's great things about it, but there's also challenges in that setting. And I loved the work that I was doing and the flexibility that just a coaching role provided versus a principal role. And I was planning on staying there for a while, just because I got to learn so much, and it was a way different pace than the principalship. However, I got a call from Sheraton, Iowa, when I was a consultant, which Sheraton was my very first teaching job too. So that's where I started my teaching career. I taught there for 4 years. And I got this call to come back, and I was kind of hesitant, I don't know, I really love my consultant job. And then I got to thinking more and more about it and decided to go right back into the principalship because it wasn't about the job and the roles and responsibilities. It was about the community and the kids that I was serving. And I wanted to serve that community of kids and families and staff. So that maybe was my biggest praise is I could probably, especially now with the title of Iowa Elementary Principal, I could probably get a job a lot of different places. And I've had people call and offer me positions. And my heart is in our rural community. And that's where I see myself staying for a very long time and leading.
You've shared, Jayme, that you are still very deeply connected to your community. And that's just an example of that, being able to feel comfortable coming back. But how do you balance being both a member of the community and being a leader within it? That's a fine balancing act in rural communities.
Yeah. And actually, I'm not in Sheraton. I live in a rural community next to Sheraton. So it's actually a different district. So I get the unique perspective of two different rural communities, but we're within, 25-minute drive of one another. So I can still keep a little separation, but still be close enough to be very, very involved. And, at heart, I've been in Sheraton for so long over the years as teacher and then coming back as a principal that I feel like I am a community member. When you stay somewhere long enough, you get, especially in a rural community, that's a benefit is you get to be a part of that community, whether you live there or not. And there is that deep sense of community, and school is your hub for your community. And so I get to be seen as, a very respected member of the community. And then, it does take intentionality though, too, like attending Rotary meetings, attending Kiwanis, I've attended church services that families have invited me to. So, there is still that intentionality piece, but it's easy to do when you're in a small community because people are so inviting.
Yeah. One of the things, and I appreciate that comment about the school being the hub of the community, the heart of the community. And as a rural leader, there are expectations that come with that. You're not only the principal, but you're a community advocate and you're a counselor and you're all of the things. And there's some difficulty potentially with navigating that. So how do you navigate all of those different expectations around being a principal in a rural area?
I don't know. No one's ever asked me that question before. I think it's just part of the job. One of the things that I've heard you mention on your podcast a lot, and just you ask people a lot, like we wear a lot of hats in the rural community.
Yep.
Where I am also the special ed director of my district. So that is a job in itself. And so, I'm special ed director, I'm equity coordinator, I'm principal. I also try to be very involved in the community. And so it is kind of a balancing act. But I just do the best I can. And I ask for grace, I can't do it all. And it did take a while. I think I've had to build a little credibility because I can't be at everything.
Yep.
I'm not from the community, but if I'm visible at the events I should be visible at, and I'm trying and making an effort, and I do a lot of trying to engage people on social media so people know who I am. And I think I built that credibility. And so I can give myself grace if I don't make it to everything and do all the things. Yeah. And I think I do pretty good at setting boundaries as well. So
important. One of the things that I've had multiple conversations with leaders about is people that come into a rural community that may not either be from the community or they don't have experience living and working in a rural area to begin with, which you do. You understand rurality, but talk a little bit about what somebody that doesn't have that background might need to take into consideration when they're coming into a rural community for the first time in a new position like a principalship. What would they want to make sure that they were paying attention to and doing to ensure that the community was aware of who they are and what they were all about?
I think about our community in Sheraton. There's a huge sense of pride. Most of the people that live there, they grew up there. They choose to live in Sheraton. A lot of our staff are Sheraton graduates, which is an awesome benefit because we're growing people to come back. And it's really important that people would understand why we have such a strong sense of pride and take part in that. And be proud to be a Charger and be proud to be a part of the Sheraton Community School District. Even if it's, you show up at the sporting events and you're wearing your Sheraton Charger gear. We had our homecoming, and our homecoming is like the biggest event of the year, and it is amazing. I've been in, I can't remember, 8 different districts I have served in, or 7. And there's nothing like Sheraton homecoming. People are coming back for a week. It's like people take vacation to come back for homecoming. So those are things that you have to be aware of so you don't change some of those traditions, right? We have a homecoming parade. We do this. You have to maintain the tradition because of that strong sense of pride. And there's something so wonderful about that too, the nostalgia and the tradition. So you have to know what you can push on and what you need to leave alone. But also they need to be aware that there's a certain way you navigate. You have to navigate change. Because change is really, really hard. And so, later on, if we could talk, I'd love to talk about the mindsets. Mindsets, it's not money. That's our biggest problem. A lot of people are like, oh, rural school districts, money is the biggest challenge or barrier. But I think it's actually mindsets. But a new leader would understand those things and how you have to start shifting mindsets in order to get change to happen. But yeah, I would say just being visible as much as possible and learning about the traditions and showing people that you want to be a part of that community.
Well, let's jump into that, Jayme, because you're right. Change is really difficult, especially in close-knit places where they do hold on to their legacies and tradition is so important. So talk a little bit more about how would you lead if you were someone that was coming in. or even if you'd been there for a while. I mean, it doesn't have to be the newcomer. It could also be just any kind of change where you're getting resistance when you have new systems or expectations that you're introducing. What would you recommend people do?
I think we always have to, whenever we're thinking about change, we have to think about making sure we start with our why, of course. Why do we need the change? And building that buy-in from a purpose standpoint. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And then, of course, when you're trying to change systems, you're thinking about providing clarity, providing consistency, providing people are competent with the change. All those three, we talked about the 3 C's. Just being mindful of all those things, but I think it always goes back to purpose. And I think change is going to be, you're going to want to do the same things you do in any district with changing things. But keeping in mind that in a rural district, you're going to have some different barriers. And a lot of times one of the biggest barriers would be money and resources.
Sure.
But the other biggest barrier I would say would be mindsets. So being mindful, knowing that mindsets are going to be a challenge. Some of those mindsets are that, this is the way we've always done things. And when you have a community that's rich with tradition, you can't argue with that. We've always done things this way. So knowing you're going to be faced with that, being prepared to say, well, here's the data and I'm going to show you why it's not working. Right. But then you have people that will say, well, it worked for me, so why fix it? Because again, many of the people that are at the table making decisions are people that benefited from our system. Mm-hmm. Our school, our administrators, most of them graduated from Sheraton High School. And they're pretty successful. They're in positions where they're making these big decisions. And so I'm constantly trying to get them to put on their equity lens and shift their perspective and saying to them, hey, this worked for you or this worked for your kids, but who is this not serving? Who did this not work for? Mm. Because our mission is successful learning for all students. What does all really mean? And here's the data to show you that it's not working for all students. So helping them to get beyond their own experiences to recognize that, all means all. Yeah. And we're going to have things a little differently. I get there's a lot of opportunities to bring other voices to the table. So we, for example, had it's a SIAC School Improvement Advisory Council. We pick a few parents and community members to be on that council for each building. I intentionally seek out parents who have children who have disabilities or a parent who maybe doesn't speak English, or I'm trying to get more voices to the table, make decisions and help provide that perspective so that we can start challenging the way we've always done things. Another thing I did was I intentionally sought out people. We have a larger population of Spanish-speaking students because we've had over the last 3 years a lot of Hispanic families move into the area. Mm-hmm. I made a strong effort to reach out to a lot of these families, welcome them into our school district, welcome them into our community. And then I have hired many, many people. I actually have hired 3 staff members who don't speak any English yet. And they are, I have the Spanish teacher at the high school. She's amazing. She's been giving them free tutoring, these 3 employees that are just in my building. And they are learning English and providing some bilingual services for us. They're able to communicate with our families on the phone. They're able to they're able to translate for our dual language learning students. And it was a little bit of work at first because I've had to go through and translate all of our work papers, translate so that I could hire these ladies. And they have been such an asset to our building, but it takes that kind of intentionality to to get these voices to the table, to bring these people into our school community, and even like to get these resources and be innovative, because all means all, and we need to serve our community. The other mindset shift would be low expectations. So whenever I think sometimes I face low expectations, as staff might have lower expectations for certain kids, and parents have low expectations for their kids. There's a balance between, I always try to honor parents' expectations for their kids in terms of, I don't care if Johnny comes back and doesn't go to college. I don't care if he comes back and works at home, or he comes back and works in my shop, and he's a mechanic. That's awesome. I honor that. I think that's wonderful. I think that's fantastic. But I want to provide Johnny with every possible opportunity. So if he wants to choose a different path for himself, he can do that. So, and I'm not saying coming back to our community and working is a low expectation, but I don't want that to be the only expectation for our kids, is that they do XYZ. And then also we have a lot of, we have a lot of poverty. We have a lot of generational trauma. Those are just things that we deal with on a regular basis, and we can become very desensitized to that. Just the other day, I had a student say that they were living in a camper. They'd been living in a camper for a few months, and I didn't think much of it. But then later I went home that night and I said, how am I getting desensitized when a child says I live in a camper and I don't really think too much of it? It's just becoming the norm. And that kind of scared me a little bit, because it made me think, I have to remember that even though we have a lot of poverty and we have a lot of trauma, we have to continue to keep that in our minds and address those challenges.
When you think about those challenges that, to your point earlier, can go unseen, right? Whether it's poverty or trauma or resource gaps, there's a lot of things that you as a principal are going to deal with, no matter where you live. I mean, whether you're in an urban area or a rural area, you're going to be facing those challenges. They show up differently, though, in rural communities. A lot of it is access around services or supports, and how do you get families connected with the things that they need in order to deal with those challenges. What are the ones that, and you talked a little bit about it, Jayme, but what are the ones that most shape your daily decisions as a principal in a rural school?
So what challenges would be the ones that shape my decisions? I would definitely say on a day-to-day basis, it is resources. I wouldn't say it's staffing so much as resources. We have to be very creative. I have to be, and kind of that, take the lead on seeking out a lot of those resources, which is a time-consuming thing sometimes. And then helping get families connected to those resources. But again, the bright side of the rural community is I don't have to do that work alone. And we think that there are no resources, but there are. There are a lot of things right in our community, whether it's we have an amazing interchurch council. And if I call up the head of the interchurch council, he's on the phone with, 10 other pastors in the area getting what we need. And so as far as like day-to-day needs, we have an amazing food bank, which is fantastic. We've got, all those, basic daily living resources. Where we really struggle is mental health. And so we've had to get really creative with our mental health resources. But again, I think it's out there, and we're finding new ways to provide those supports. Whether it be we are collaborating, contacting people to come in and provide those, or we're reaching out and we're getting services digitally and things like that set up virtually. Yes. Yeah.
And then I don't think that is unusual. Those partnerships or community assets that you're able to tap in to really help address those, they're sometimes very deep-rooted challenges. You as a principal are the number one cheerleader for your students in your school. And a lot of that comes down to advocating for what's best for them and what their needs are. If there was one statewide policy that would better serve the students in your schools and their families, what would that be?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I don't know if it's a policy per se. I think we just need more funding. We need the decision makers to understand what it's like, the day-to-day realities of rural schools. We unfortunately have many schools in Iowa that I think over the next 5 years, they're going to be shutting down because just can't. It's not sustainable. Their districts are way too small. And so we're seeing a lot of schools that are job sharing, and people are traveling back and forth to fill positions because staffing is really difficult. And it all boils down to funding. And then the other thing would be, as a special ed director, districts are in a deficit when it comes to special ed, major deficit. And I think that's a direct result of not funding Tier 1. If we don't fund Tier 1, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. And so we're hemorrhaging at the Tier 3 level and we're going into a major special ed deficit. And so I think just really advocating for funding, and whether that's like we're relooking at the voucher bills, or we are just figuring out how we can fund schools better, because we're not fully funded. So
yeah, I want to shift a little bit and talk about, because it's not all doom and gloom. Even though there are challenges, and they're big ones, and there are barriers, and we know that they exist, but rural schools are often described as big families. So what do you do intentionally to nurture that sense of belonging while you're still maintaining, professional boundaries and high expectations, which you've mentioned before? But that is really a bright side of rural schools. Talk about what that looks like in your school.
Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, there's already a strong sense of community, and your school is the hub, right? And the teachers and principals are still very highly respected in the community. There's still this sense of you're going to listen to your teacher because that's the right thing to do. We have a lot of parent support when it comes to, we have to call home and partner with us when it's a challenging issue, like a behavior issue. So people genuinely want to invest in our schools and our teachers. We just have to, as leaders, provide opportunities for them to invest and engage. And so whether that's opportunities for them to come into the school, one of the, I think, worst things that we did that came out of COVID maybe was we went virtual with our conferences and things like that, but we never opened our doors back up. We right away, we said, no, we're going to open our doors back up as soon as we can, and we're going to get parents back in our building, and virtual won't be an option.
Right.
They need to get it. We need our parents in our building. We take every opportunity we can, especially because my building is a K-2 building. And so we're shaping their experience, and we're shaping the parents' experiences and how they see school. And some of them did not have a good experience. Mm-hmm. So we take every opportunity to get parents in our building. So instead of having like a, back to school night, we do individual back to school conferences, and teachers set those up so we can have one-on-one time with families as they come in, especially for our new kindergarten parents. We do a lot of like meet the teacher nights and different opportunities. Family literacy night is huge. It was crazy. We had family literacy night. We had over 300 kids in our building, and we don't even an enrollment of 300. So kids were coming from the other building for family literacy night, and our line was wrapped clear around the corner and down the street to get into the building.
Wow.
And it was amazing. But that literacy night also turned into, it's a family resource night. And so we had a counseling service, churches, different organizations, the Food Bank of Iowa. They had all set up in the gym, so people were getting some resources as well. So it's just being creative and connecting the dots for people and getting them into our school. Mm-hmm. Because again, school is the central hub. It's the heart of the community, and we can utilize that space for more than just school, as you think. So we do a lot of that. We just do a lot of those types of activities. And then I don't know, one thing that I feel very strongly about is we are a Capturing Kids' Hearts district.
Yep.
And so that has really transformed just how and we are on target to become a national showcase school for that. We're a Rising Star school, and I think we're going to hit the national showcase level this year. And with that, we have seen the impact. We have seen how our staff treat each other, our staff treat our kids treat our staff and each other, but also how we treat parents and how we engage with parents. And so that's helped tremendously too. There's just a strong sense of connection, community, and belonging within our whole district.
That's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that, Jayme. And it's a phenomenal framework to operate within, where you're intentionally building joy and laughter as part of the work. Can you talk a little bit about what you do specifically to keep morale high when you have the challenges around resources being tight or when the job feels heavy? What are some of those things that you do to celebrate teaching?
Yeah, so much of that has come. I've always done fun things with staff and try to keep things light and fun. We do things all the time, like, we might have a fun day where the secretary gets on the intercom and is like, we kind of play these games where she announces something and then teachers win prizes throughout the day. I can't even think of an example right now, but we just have those fun little morale boosters. But none of that really shapes culture. That keeps kind of morale up there, but it's very temporary. True joy, I think, in our profession comes from so much more than just doing those fun little games and activities. Like a food day. We just had food day today because it's boss's day. We have food days all the time with our staff. And we love a good food day, but food day isn't going to make me handle a difficult situation with a colleague better tomorrow, and I won't snap at them. We've been really intentional about building a culture that is based upon collaboration, respect. We have a social contract that we follow, and this is how we treat each other. And we're very intentional with greeting each other. We're very intentional with affirmations. So we're constantly building a system affirmation. So our staff, we have a Whoop Whoop Wednesday where they write out affirmations, and our secretary will announce those affirmations over the intercom. We have smack cards. Those are these cards you can get off the internet, and it's about spreading messages of compassion and kindness to one another. So we're constantly doing affirmations. Our kids are writing affirmations to one another. It's just built into the culture of like who we are and how we do business. Plus, I feel like when I lead my staff well, I can be organized. I can be clear. There isn't a lot of chaos. I follow through on things. It just becomes a better culture when you have strong leadership. So and I'm not saying on purpose, oh my goodness, I have lots of areas to grow in, but I also am very authentic, and I tell my staff that all the time. Like, I'm sorry I messed up, guys. Give me some grace. Like, we're just creating that culture, and I try to lead that by example. But one of the best things I think that a rural district can do is bring in strong leaders or pour into the leaders that are there. You have to have strong leadership who is going to lead with intention and a strong sense of purpose.
Very well said. Very well said. We hear stories all the time that don't necessarily quantify what we know to be rural excellence. So how can we tell the story of rural communities not as a deficit, but really as the model for innovation and asset building and truly excellence?
I love what you're doing with the podcast. I think those are things that we can do. I know some of this work has to start kind of at the state level. I'm really excited because school administrators of Iowa Lane Buck is the communication director there. She is starting I don't remember if it's a podcast or a website, but it's all about sharing the stories of Iowa districts. It's really to not just promote rural districts, but promote public education. Sharing stories, and she's getting the word out there. And so one of the things that I remind my staff, and I am constantly, we were just talking about it yesterday in a staff meeting, if we don't tell our story, somebody else will. And so we have to put ourselves out there and share those stories. So we're starting to be much more intentional with social media. I shared a testimonial that a parent had written. So I had a parent tell me what does she believe about the experience she's had as a new kindergarten mom. It was wonderful. She had glowing review for our school, our teachers, from how her son has been greeted when he comes to school in the morning to how much he loves his teacher. And I put that testimonial out on our Facebook page because we have to start sharing our stories and telling our story so people don't make up their own assumptions about rural schools.
Absolutely.
And if we could do that at a state level and really like Lane's trying to do, we can get our message out there to even a broader audience. So
yeah, well said. What are you hopeful about right now? What gives you optimism for the future as it relates to rural education?
Let's see. I think there are so many great things going on, whether it's, I think technology has helped us to be able to network even more and get those resources. AI, that is something that's not just reserved for districts that are bigger and have a lot of money. AI can get into every classroom, whether you're rural or not. Resources pretty much free. So there's a lot of things out there in terms of technology that's kind of making things way more accessible for rural schools. I'm very excited about, I think I'm really excited about our district in particular because we have strong leadership and we're pushing the status quo a little bit and really striving for excellence. I love the whole push of, if you go to any conference, the talk at all conferences is AI, but also social emotional, not just social emotional kids, but social emotional learning for adults. How do we help adults become more resilient educators? When adults have a high social emotional competency and adults have resiliency, they teach better and they can not just survive, but they can thrive. Teaching is really hard work.
Yeah.
And it's becoming harder and harder. And there are challenges in every district, but especially in rural districts sometimes. And with the trauma, there adds another layer because there's actually something called secondary trauma. We can experience trauma from dealing with others' trauma.
Yep.
And so we have to acknowledge that in our rural schools. And I think that with this push for more of the conversation centered around social emotional learning and resilience and trauma, we can better support our staff. Now that that's kind of a national focus.
Yeah. And so important to be aware of and to be thinking about and to be leading around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Jayme, there's one question that I always ask my listeners, and you probably know what it is. What does the term rural advantage mean to you?
Rural advantage. Wow. It means like, I feel so blessed. That's what rural advantage to me is, the blessing that I've had to be where I am today. And it's very, I can contribute it highly to the opportunities that I had growing up in rural Iowa and in a rural district. And I've made it to where I am. And the odds were against me, right? The odds were absolutely against me. And I was able to overcome the odds. And now I'm doing some great things in service of others. And every kid can have the rural advantage. Every kid can be where I am. Because of the adults in these communities that are forming connections and a sense of belonging with kids. And when we are intentional in our rural districts and when we are intentional about connection and belonging and all those things, any kid can get to where I am. So that, to me, is maybe the rural advantage.
I love that answer. Yeah. Well, Jayme, I want to thank you for sharing your story and really for reminding us that rural leadership is both personal and powerful, and it's rooted in lived experience. And it truly is, as you've said over and over again, it's fueled by hope. So thank you for bringing your authentic self and sharing that with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Well, for those of you that are listening, my friends, I hope that you heard in Jayme's words what I hear every day in rural schools, and that's courage and compassion and conviction, that our kids, no matter where they live, deserve the very best. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to the Rural Scoop. And please share it with another rural educator or community leader who could use a little bit of inspiration this week. Remember, the rural advantage isn't just a phrase. It is truly, as Jayme pointed out, a promise. It's the pride we carry, it's the people we serve, and the purpose that drives us to lead together. So until next time, I'm Melissa Sadorf, and this is the Rural Scoop. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Rural Scoop. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep these important rural conversations going. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment or share your thoughts. You can follow along and never miss a new release by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform or by following us on social. We're on YouTube at The Rural Scoop, Instagram at msadorf1, and X at msadorf03. The Rural Scoop is produced with support from Vela Educational Consultants. To learn more, visit velaconsultants.com. See you next time for more great discussions about rural education. And as always, keep leaning in to the rural advantage.